Welcome to the Positive Reinforcement Unit. Here's where we start to learn how we can change the behavior we observe. In ABA-based interventions, positive reinforcement is the process of increasing or strengthening a target behavior through reward and positive feedback, which are called positive reinforcers. That's a large part of how we as ABA educators make sure the student learns that the behavior or skill just performed was in fact what we wanted them to do. So in this unit, you'll learn all about positive reinforcement. You'll learn how it's used and why it's used in ABA teaching procedures. I'll also introduce you to different kinds of positive reinforcers, and I'll show you the use of positive reinforcement in action during teaching sessions. And finally, you'll get a chance to practice delivering positive reinforcement yourself. So whenever you're ready, let's get started. Positive reinforcement involves providing a consequence to a student after the student does a skill or behavior correctly. It will be your responsibility to make sure that the student receives a positive reinforcer, such as praise, after the student makes a correct response on a skill that the student's learning. Now, because the reinforcer comes after the target behavior, we call a reinforcer a consequence. For example, when you were growing up, your parents or teachers probably used positive consequences to increase some behavior or skill of yours. And they might have used negative consequence to decrease some behavior of yours too. But in this training course, we're going to stick with positive consequences because that's what we use to teach. Now, in ABA-based teaching, we call the positive consequence we provide, following a correct demonstration of the target behavior, a positive reinforcer. That is, we provide something we know is rewarding to that child after each correct response. When we reward a student for correct responses and only correct responses, the student learns to continue making that response. The positive outcome we give to children after doing something correctly can be praise, such as, "Great job sitting down." Children love this kind of attention and enthusiasm. Let me show you what good praise looks like.
Perfect. Awesome. Nice job.
Other reinforcers can be used too, like stickers or time with a favorite toy, or even points toward a bigger reward, like a trip to the school store or time on the computer. By using positive reinforcement, you'll be able to change and improve your students' behavior. Think of positive reinforcement as a tool. It'll be something that you're going to use in your work on a daily basis. Now I want to tell you more about how we use positive reinforcement as part of our teaching procedures. Remember, positive reinforcement is a positive outcome for a student after he or she makes a correct response. Now, there are many different factors that influence how effective the positive reinforcer will be for each student. For our students to learn as much as they can, we have to pay attention to what is most effective, what works and why it works, and we need to use this understanding in our teaching practices. So what makes a reinforcer effective? Timing. The consequence needs to be delivered immediately following the behavior. It means within about a second and a half of the behavior occurring. This means the relation between the behavior and the reward will be stronger. That is, the target behavior becomes even more likely to occur. If you wait longer than that, you can end up rewarding some other behavior that you didn't intend to reward. Contingency. You must provide the positive reinforcer after the target behavior and not after some other behavior. This allows the student to differentiate or tell the difference between the target behavior, what is correct, and all other behaviors, like an incorrect response. This is known as differential reinforcement. You are purposefully choosing to provide positive reinforcement only when the target behavior occurs. Motivation. In some situations, the reinforcer will be made more effective than in other situations. For example, if you're using a food item and the student has just eaten lunch, the student is less likely to want food as a reward for a behavior. But if instead you provide this student with time with his favorite toy, if he completes his reading assignment after lunch, the student will be much more motivated to do the work that you've asked him to do. Again, positive reinforcement is meant to strengthen behavior, that is, make it more likely to happen again in the future. By paying attention to timing, contingency, and motivation factors, you can make it more likely that the reinforcer that you're using will be effective. Now, you should also know that what might work with one student may not work with another student at all. We all like different things, so it makes sense that different things would be rewarding for different students. Some common reinforcers are food, toys or other items of interest, attention, and praise. Now, to give you an idea of the range of possible reinforcers, I want you to explore some common day-to-day scenarios and look at how a behavior is related to a reinforcer in these situations. I like to use these real-life examples because they're easy to relate to, and these situations are probably familiar to you. We're going to be applying what we've already learned about what a reinforcer is and what makes a reinforcer effective. Do you remember the three main factors that make a reinforcer effective? Timing, contingency, and motivation. So in the next segment, you'll be clicking on each box of another learning object to explore the different reinforcement situations. Well, let's talk about selecting the best reinforcers to use with your students. When you get down to it, we only know something is a reinforcer by testing it to see if it really does strengthen the behavior. As you saw in the real-life examples, the positive outcomes were all things that the person in that situation really did want. Well, sometimes we don't know what our students want, especially if they're nonverbal or having difficulty communicating, which is very common in students with learning delays or special learning needs. There may be a consequence that you think will strengthen a student's target behavior. Maybe you've worked with many children who love stickers, but you cannot assume that each new student you work with will like stickers or that stickers will be effective as a reinforcer for that student all the time, no matter what the task is that you're working on. For example, if a student does not like stickers or loses interest in them, then giving that student a sticker would not work as a positive reinforcer, even if you think that you've followed the timing, contingency, and motivational guidelines. You're simply not providing a consequence for that student that is effective. So why would the student repeat his or her performance? Maybe stickers are even bothering that student. If that's the case, then you may be actually discouraging the student from repeating that behavior or skill. So as you can see, selecting the best reinforcers is very important. Every student is different, so we must find out what items will work as reinforcers for each student. Using positive reinforcement will allow you to change and improve your student's behavior, but only if the consequence is a highly desirable one. Every student will have different preferences and different needs. So in the next section, I'll show you how we select reinforcers in ABA interventions. There are several methods you can use when you're selecting preferred consequences that may work as reinforcers when used in teaching. I'll tell you about the 4 most common ways that are used to figure out what consequences may work as reinforcers with each student. Ask. One of the easiest ways to find out what kinds of things a student prefers is to ask his parents and other teachers. Usually, parents will be able to list toys, activities, and food items their child chooses regularly. These frequent choices indicate the child's individual preferences. You can even ask the student if the student is verbal and can understand your question. For example, a parent might tell you that his child loves to play with toy cars. You could try using toy cars as a reinforcer for that student. Observe. Another easy way to find out a student's preferences is to simply watch the child. What do you see? Anything the student chooses or engages with frequently is likely to be a preferred item. For example, at recess every day, you notice and write down the student's activity choice. For the 5 days, the student played on the swings. You've observed that swinging is a preferred activity and will probably be a good reinforcer for that student. You can try using swing time as a reinforcer to see if it works. Provide a sample. You could pick an item to present to the student. After letting the student try out the item, you can then try using it as a reinforcer. You could do this with several items and see which item has the most success at functioning as a reward for the student. For example, you stack blocks with a student during free play one day. The student then goes to reading, and you tell the student he can play with the blocks if he completes his reading assignment for the day. Does the student complete his reading assignment so that he can play with the blocks? If yes, the blocks are a good choice for a reinforcer. If not, the student might not be interested enough in playing with the blocks to complete his reading assignment in order to get playtime with the blocks. Run a preference assessment. A preference assessment or test is very commonly used to find out what sorts of things a student prefers. Teachers like using this assessment because it can be fun for the student. This method is systematic, which means the paraprofessional will follow a set procedure. For example, Melanie is one of our new paraprofessionals who is just starting to work with Megan. To figure out what reinforcers she should use, the behavior specialist has taught Melanie how to conduct a preference assessment. This is also a great icebreaker because during the assessment, Megan is getting to choose some of her favorite items and Melanie is building rapport with Megan. Here's how it works. Melanie will present 2 or more items to Megan and say, "Pick your favorite." Megan makes her choice and Melanie will give it to her. Each time she'll write down what was presented and what Megan chose. At the end of the assessment, Melanie can count the number of times Megan chose each item. The item that was picked the most times is what we call Megan's most preferred item. Well, this is just one way to conduct a preference assessment. There are really lots of other ways, and you'll find out about those once you get on the job. Now in the next section, you'll be completing an interactive exercise. This exercise will give you a chance to practice delivering positive reinforcement in a way that will strengthen the student's target behavior. You're going to be watching Joey build a puzzle for a couple of minutes. We need you to help the paraprofessional provide verbal praise to Joey each time he successfully adds a piece to the puzzle. On the opening screen to this exercise, you'll see the operational definition of adding a puzzle piece. After the exercise starts, the way you reinforce is easy. When Joey finishes adding a new piece to the puzzle, immediately click the Deliver Praise button at the bottom of your window, and you'll hear the praise. Again, praise, the positive reinforcer, must be delivered immediately following a correct instance of the target behavior. If you're too soon or too late with your praise, you'll receive feedback telling you this. This exercise contains 2 segments. When you've successfully completed the first segment, you'll be allowed to move on to the second one. The second segment is just like the first, except that you won't receive any feedback as you praise. Instead, we'll tell you at the end how you did. If you don't pass, you'll be asked to start over and try again. And you can do that as many times as you need to. But if you're not passing the second one, you really should go back to the first one for more review. Okay, both segments follow the same procedures, so all you have to do is watch Joey and decide when to deliver praise.
Hey Joey, you want to do a puzzle?
Yep.
Yeah, let's start down here.
Well, let's review what you've learned in this unit. To increase the likelihood that the target behavior will occur again, we provide positive reinforcers to the student after the behavior or skill is performed correctly, that is, according to our operational definition. Reinforcers work best when they are provided immediately, provided contingently, that is, when they are provided only when the target behavior is performed correctly, and not provided for incorrectly performed target behaviors, and when the child is properly motivated to receive the reinforcer. Finding out what consequences may work best as reinforcers involves asking others what the child likes, observing the student to see what he or she likes, conducting a preference assessment. Now, once you've mastered the basics of delivering positive reinforcement, you will have taken a critical step to learning how to successfully teach children with ASDs. When our students' target skills and behaviors are strengthened by consistently using positive reinforcement for correct performances, we help the students master what we teach them, and they gain independence on many important skills and behaviors. Now, in the next section, you'll learn how to teach using something called discrete trial training, or DTT. DTT is one of the most common teaching procedures that you're going to be using. And a very important part of DTT is the use of positive reinforcement. You'll be providing positive reinforcement for each and every one of your students' responses.